Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first presentation of today. We will present to you our team project. Well, Sophie is just there, so she knows this part. So our project was basically to help the UIAA review and actually improve their governance framework model, and based on some recommendations from the IOC. But before we go into these details, I just want to start by introducing the team. So we're four: Christine from the USA, Gina, she's from Germany and Canada, Vinit is from India, and my name is Gil, I am from Portugal. We also want to acknowledge two persons. The first one is Geert, he was our supervisor. He already introduced himself, but we just want to say thank you for making sure we did a professional job. And finally, Sophie, thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us throughout the project and to be so supportive and so kind. And so today we will start by introducing to you the UIAA, the federation, and the sport we worked on. We will tell you what the project goal was, our approach to reach that goal. We will then go in detail in some of the deliverables, and we'll just conclude in the end and have time for the typical Q&A. So let's start. UIAA, it's the International Federation for Climbing and Mountaineering. It's recognized by the IOC as such, and currently is composed of 82 national member federations and 2 continental associations, one in Asia, one in Latin America. The competition sports under the UIAA umbrella are ice climbing, clean climbing, and sky running. And their main goal, or one of their main goals at the moment, is to have ice climbing become an Olympic event. They already took some steps towards that goal. There were a demonstration event in Sochi, earlier this year in Lillehammer in the Youth Olympic Games, and again they will be in Pyeongchang 2018 as a demonstration event. But I think it's more interesting, rather than me talking, to actually show you it. Okay, so hopefully now you know what ice climbing is, and that's what we will be talking about during the presentation. The second part that we would like you to understand is what is governance, or at least what we understood as part of this project. There are many ways to describe it or to define it. We like this definition from the United Nations. It states that governance is a process of decision making and then all the subsequent processes of implementing those decisions, or not implementing. For you to better understand, to give you an example of governance and completely in the UIAA, and why that was an issue, I will invite you to look at this amazingly drawn scheme from Vinit, which is basically the UIAA organigram. Part of their governance bodies are the Executive Board, the Management Committee, and the General Assembly. And then there are specific commissions which deal with specific topics within the Federation. The ICE Commission is the one that deals with ice climbing. And what was happening is that some of the members have some business interests that may influence the decisions taken in the Commission. So the goal is to move this decision power up in the hierarchy and have the Executive Board propose decisions, then the Management Committee discuss them, and finally have the General Assembly approving these decisions. This is very shortly. But what matters is that to support this change, the UIAA needed to have documents, policies such as a code of ethics or a conflict of interest to support this change and to avoid such situations as I've described. I hope that's clear for you. Going back to governance, and this was the basis of our work, in 2008, the IOC came up with this document which they call the Basic Universal Principles of Good Governance. It's a list of 38 indicators which the IOC believes that all federations should implement to have a good governance structure inside their organization. The UIAA analyzed this document because it's actually one of the criteria that the IOC looks into when they want to decide to have a new Olympic event. And by analyzing it, they found a list of points, areas in which were either not being addressed or at least not to the extent that the IOC requires. And so that was the goal of our project. That's what the UIAA asked from us, is to help them improve their governance model and align it with the IOC's recommendation. And so Gina will now explain to you how we did it.
Thank you. How did we come up with this framework of good governance, or rather better governance. So we did two research methodologies. We used two research methodologies, one being the desk research and one being personal interviews. Desk research was mainly, we looked into other international federations that are similar to UIAA in terms of size and value and where they want to go. And we also looked into nonprofit organizations such as WWF that has a similar value in terms of sustainability, for example. Then our other form of research was through personal interviews. We went to an event in Tignes, and there we were able to do some face-to-face interviews with athletes, some coaches, the organizer, and this really just gave us a good and better understanding of what UIAA itself is all about. So at the beginning of the year, we were giving these 11 deliverables, and after further discussions with Sophie, we decided to make these 4 our priority: the mission, conflict of interest, code of ethics, and risk management. As for the other 5, we had to come up with recommendations, and finally we decided to exclude these last 2. So our journey began up the mountain, with our focus being on the mission, conflict of interest, code of ethics, and risk management. Every journey begins with a purpose. What was UIAA's purpose? UIAA had a mission in place already, but after studying the IOC guidelines further, we decided to change, alter, add some things, take away some things, so they aligned further with the IOC guidelines, and then also with UIAA's 3 pillars being safety, the sport itself, and sustainability. The mission statement is in further detail in our report. If you have any questions on it further later, I'm more than happy to answer that. Let's get to the conflict of interest. So every journey will face its challenges and conflict of interest. What were UIAA's conflicts, and what are their conflict of interest and challenges that they have? So we needed to ask ourselves, when, where, how can a conflict arise within UIAA? And this we put into a policy statement. We also came up with the Declaration of Conflict of Interest, and anyone who is in some way, shape, or form involved in UIAA as a member or on the board has to then sign this Declaration of Conflict of Interest. And basically our main goal here was to avoid any arising conflict of interest. So not to deal with conflict of interest, but to basically set it terms where it's like, how can we avoid conflict of interest? In general terms, conflict of interest will arise if someone who has a personal or a business interest and has the power in the decision making of the certain situation, and this can affect the outcome of the situation. So we were given this compatibility matrix from UIAA, which really gave us a clear understanding, okay, where can the conflict of interest arise within UIAA? And I'd like to give you 2 concrete examples, because it looks a bit confusing here. So, for example, we have all the people that are involved within UIAA. Now here we have a clear conflict of interest. So everything that is red is where there is a conflict of interest. Everything where it's green, it's fine, there's no conflict of interest. And everywhere that's yellow is a potential conflict of interest. So, for example, a team coach cannot be an international judge. If the team coach of, let's say, the French Federation is an international judge, then he obviously has the conflict of interest. He has a personal interest and he has a business interest. He knows his athletes, so he will automatically favor the French athletes competing. So clearly he can't be a judge. Another example would be if an athlete was a route setter. So what is a route setter? You saw briefly in the video before. It's someone who designs the rocks, basically, and the route that the athletes are going to have to take. And in a competition, the athletes don't actually know the route beforehand. So obviously, if the athlete is a route setter, then there's a clear conflict of interest towards the other athletes. It is in UIAA's best interest to avoid any of these situations. and to thus refer to our conflict of interest policy statement. Now Christine will take you further up the mountain, beginning with the code of ethics.
So we make it here, and our goal here was, when Sophie first came to us, there was not much prior development on this. So our goal was to align it to the IOC's the IOC's code of ethics, and to their ethical principles. We developed 7 by focusing on the IOC and several other federations. And we came up with confidentiality, dignity, integrity, good governance, resources, candidatures, and relations with state. And through our research of the code of ethics, we thought it was very important to have an ethics panel. Now the ethics panel is responsible for the implementation and the supervision of the application of the code of ethics. And here they will examine any breaches of the contract, as well as keep in mind the confidentiality part, and take upon requests and recommend actions to the General Assembly. Now we will come to the very peak of the mountain, and one of the more important aspects is risk management. Now, according to the IOC's basic universal principles of good governance, a clear and adequate risk management process needs to be developed and implemented in order to identify the potential risks in your organization, evaluate them, control them, monitor them, as well as having a disclosure of transparency. And our goal here was, in general, to reduce the likelihood of an adverse event occurring, as well as to reduce the impact of that event on the organization, such as like a natural disaster. One of our recommendations included a risk register, and that's similar. It's a risk management tool in case an adverse event does happen and how to mitigate that risk. Here are a couple recommendations on these 2 specifics that we identified. One is event-specific risks. Here, a key risk was a failure to include any contractual documents between the athlete, the organizer, and the UIAA. And so between Gina, who's a water skier, and myself as an open water swimmer, both on an international level, field, and high inherent risks in our sport, we've been through a lot. We've seen a lot of things and accidents occur where they will end up resulting in the organizer or the federation taking full responsibility, and that can be a very bad and disastrous thing. So we use our experience to develop a waiver and release form to have this contract between those 3 entities. And I think in case anything happens, in case of a natural disaster, in case of a death, it's very good to have that in an organization. Another example is financial risk. Here we had Sophie came to us, and Reg said that a volunteer was asking for 10,000 francs out of a 25,000 franc budget for an IIT software. And he ended up going and asking directly to the president for this out of expense budget, or out of budget expense. And we wanted to prevent that from happening again. So we came up with a countersigning of invoices and a chain of command for this process. For a specific amount, you will have to either go through the president, the treasurer, or the nominated director. And we also recommended that they do their research and make sure this was a safe financial investment for their company, as well as to make sure it aligns with their strategic intentions of the UIAA, and then approve it or not approve it. And now I'll hand it off to Jill.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. So what was presented to you so far by Christine and Gina were what we call in the beginning the priority deliverables. Now, if you remember, we also had other topics in which we had to work, which we call the recommendations. The difference was that for the priority, we actually had to draft full policies that are directly implementable by the UIAA. And in this case, what we were asked was to give specific recommendations of actions that the UIAA can take to tackle these exact topics. So we're talking about education and training of staff, athlete education, health, safety and insurance, and fairness and fair play. Now these topics are a bit more specific to the sport or to the competition, and since none of us knew the sport in detail, we felt the need to actually get to know it, to get to know the intervenients, the participants, who is in an event and how they interact, things of this nature. So Sophie allowed us to go to an event in Tignes, France, as Gina mentioned, yes. It was a demonstration event, so it was not part of a competition, but it was still good for us to actually see the sport, to see the athletes, and to see all these different intervenients and how they collaborate to the general event. And more than that, we had the opportunity to sit down face to face and have an interview or more a conversation with 5 different people: a judge, a member of the National Federation, an athlete, a member of the AISTS Commission, and the CEO of the resort in which the event took place. And during these conversations, we asked them many questions about the topics I mentioned before. We got to know what were their concerns and potential challenges that the UIAA will have to face. And so we came up with a list of findings, a list of recommendations. We tried for each finding to give a specific recommendation. Again, it's in detail in the report. These are just some examples. Just to give you, for you to better understand what kind of recommendations we gave, I'll just highlight one. We understood that at the moment there is no structure in place to help athletes in their post-career. This happens because a big part of the athletes have a job, main job, and then the climbing is something that they do. They take it professional, but it's not their main source of income. So when they finish their climbing career, they just go back or continue with the job that they had before. We still think that if the UIAA can put in place this structure and help the athletes transition from being an athlete to remain involved with the federation, it can help further develop and grow the sport. So we gave specific recommendations in terms of internal or external platforms that they can give and promote with the athletes. So just to wrap up and recap, so we started by understanding what was the scope of the project, what was the IOC guidelines, and what was our mission. We then developed an approach for the project, and we drafted the policies and recommendations, which were our deliverables. And the next step is actually for the UIAA to decide and implement or not these policies. Just to let you know, the Code of Ethics and the Conflict of Interest, which were the 2 first deliverables, they were well received by the Executive Board, and they're now at the General Assembly level pending approval. So this is a good sign for us. And that's it. We'll have now the Q&A that will be moderated by Vinny. Thank you.